what they wanted me to do, said, if she makes another child cry, I'm going to scream. And I said, okay.
I think I went a little overboard. My recollection is you were telling me in the earpiece to get reactions from the kids. And I said to one of the kids, I asked him if he liked Harry Potter. And the kid said yes. And I said, well, he dies in the next movie. And he cried. That's what I remember.
Yeah, there was a lot of crying for all of those sprint spots. I did a whole lot of them at that school. I think it was a Christian school. So the kids were very obedient.
Right. Well, I remember sitting at lunch with the crew, and they would not sit with me. They would not look at me. They were like, that's that monster making kids cry.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's all right. I recovered from it, but
I loved it. I loved that you did it, and I thank you very much.
I thank you. I'm sure I could use the money. I wasn't selling tickets, clearly. So let me ask you a question about this, about the new doc. We can sort of start there. This Desert One. I watched
it. I like what you Give Me Shelter. That was one of the first films I worked on with the Maisel brothers.
I know. I have the big poster back here. Yeah. That was for the reissue of that was for the new print, the restored print. Yeah, I want to talk about that too, but I'm curious about, this Desert One, which is about the botched Iranian hostage rescue attempt. Like, why this film now?
Well, the History Channel was going to do 100 different feature-length documentaries about little-known pieces of history that people really hadn't seen. I mean, people saw the hostage crisis, but they really never saw the mission because it was a secret mission.
And it failed.
Yes, it totally failed. Murphy's Law. If anything could go wrong, everything went wrong.
But I think that's what's interesting about the times we live in and the timing of the thing is that, American failure is this weird sort of shameful thing. And I thought that was what was sort of fascinating about it. But I'm sorry to interrupt the History Channel.
No, you can interrupt anytime you want. But anyway, they only ended up doing 4 or 5 of them. And one of on the list was Desert One. And we saw it and we thought, this is incredible. It's very challenging. Plus, we have to figure out how to make the mission come alive because there was not one photograph, not anything of it. So,
except for the wreckage on the Iranian side.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, later they had the wreckage. They kept the wreckage.
Right, they kept the wreckage, but also they put some stuff on the news with the bodies, and that they somehow framed it as a victory that God had helped them in this botched attempt.
And they still are. Every April 24th, they built a mosque on that site, and they sing songs about their triumph.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. It reminded me the sort of seeing documentaries, like watching Ken Burns' Vietnam, where he was able to sort of really get into and speak to Viet Cong and North Vietnamese fighters, was to me profound. And in the same way that in Desert One, you're talking to Iranian nationals who, were there for the revolution, believed in the revolution, took part in the revolution, and now part of mainstream politics in Iran. And they're willing to talk about this from their experience.
Well, they're very hardline, except they totally believe in it, except for this one young man that we found. I didn't go to Iran because they wouldn't let us in. So we had a Iranian female crew, which was great. And they went to this small village near Tabas and found this guy who was 11 years old. He had always gone with his family on a bus. Once a year, the whole family went on a bus on a vacation. And they just happened to roll right into the whole military scene, the military mission. And they were stopped. They were held as hostages. And when all he wanted, though, he was telling us this story as if he was 11 years old again. And what he wanted to do was get home safe so he could tell all his friends, about this exciting thing that he had seen.
It was crazy.
I thought that was remarkable because there's so much commonality in that. We would do the same thing. Right.
Like he didn't know what was going on, but it was cool.
It was unbelievably cool. Yeah, for an 11-year-old.
Well, that was just like the first domino to fall. First, they can't get the 2 helicopters through, and then they only got 6 going in, and they find this empty lake bed with this dirt road through it, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this bus with 50 people, where one family comes just driving into this operation where they've just landed 3 planes and all these helicopters. It was crazy, and then it just goes worse and worse from there until tragedy, until horrible things happen, and like, I had no idea about that stuff. I didn't remember it. And the thing you didn't, linger on too long was the idea of whether or not the timing of it. Did Reagan, sort of through back channels stop Khomeini from, releasing the hostages until after he was inaugurated? I would say that, judging by the work that you guys did, that he probably didn't.
Oh, I don't know. I think he could have.
Yeah, I think he could have.
I just found out from Ambassador Lindbergh that his campaign manager went to Mexico and met with Iranians. And
really?
Supposedly, I just found this out like in the last few days.
It's a little late.
And said, you'll get a better deal from us. And Khomeini, of course, wanted to humiliate President Carter because he was taking care of the Shah for medical reasons.
Yeah, but he wanted to do that anyways.
Yeah, but this was the last blasted Carter. 1 minute after Reagan was inaugurated, the hostages were released.
I get it. Well, he wanted to humiliate. What I'm thinking, the sticking point for me is that he wanted to humiliate Carter either way. So it behooved him to wait.
Yes,
either way.
Yes. And this would be beautiful. Reagan would be in and boom, Reagan could announce the hostages are free.
Right.
The thing that had just ripped apart President Carter.
Right. But that could have happened without Reagan. Like, I mean, he didn't have to get involved. It seemed like Khomeini would have done it, was sharp enough to wait.
Right. It probably would have done it either way.
Right.
But so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Which is, what was it like to interview Barack Obama? Was it just wonderful? Because I know I've interviewed President Carter in this film. So were you nervous? How was it?
Well, for me, it was a little more structured than I'm used to doing, and we only had an hour, and it was a big deal. I was more nervous that I wouldn't be able to do the type of interview I do, that there was sort of a lot of, because I do personal interviews, and I didn't want to get into the weeds with politics really, because anybody could do that. And certainly he can, that's it's a way for him to be evasive, and kind of boring. So it was really, the trick was to figure out where I wanted to go with him. Use the time efficiently, cover what was necessary to be covered, but still get a sense of who he was. So, very quickly, I found him to be very disarming, and it did just become a couple of guys talking, which was the best I could hope for. So in that way, it was surprising in that he was sort of pretty down to earth, really.
And how did you do it? I mean, did it take a long time for you to get him?
No, because we were open to it. It was their idea. He was on the verge of becoming somewhat of a lame duck. It was in the last year of his last term, and and I think they were like, this would be good if he does this. But coincidentally and horribly, there was that horrendous shooting. That Dylan Roof guy shot up that church and killed all those people like days before. We interviewed him, and we thought it was certainly going to be canceled, but he chose to continue. He came, and we had to address certain things around race and around guns and around violence, and that became the most of the politics we talked about, which is good because it's not really politics. It's it's
human emotion.
It's human horror. Yeah. Now let me ask you about that, because after watching, I've talked to a few documentarians, and I've watched your stuff from way back. I rewatched Harlan County. And what is it why do people who make documentaries feel like they need to use animation now? When did that happen?
Well, I had to use it in Desert One.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
There were no photographs. There was no footage. There was no nothing. All I could do was, listen to what the guys told me. And then we had to recreate it. And we had an Iranian animator. We got all the history books out to see what helicopters looked like then and C-130.
Oh, really?
Planes. And we did it absolutely to perfection. It was the only way in which we could tell the story. And what was really incredible is that the guys said, how did you do this? This is exactly as we remember it. You
mean the American soldiers?
Yeah, the American soldiers. Yeah.
I found that stuff very moving, that, how this haunted those guys, that the failure of it, that it was out of their control and that decisions were made. But most of the failure was just blotched shit. It wasn't anyone's fault, really. They did everything they could. It seemed like they were bailing on it, when the shit went down. They were bailing on it because they were, one of the helicopters was fucked up, right?
Well, they only could have 6 helicopters that had to be working, but they didn't. They had 5. So 3 of the helicopters went down. But it's interesting because the hostages didn't know anything about it. They thought that they were abandoned and that nobody was coming to help them or to do anything. And one of them, Ambassador John Limbert, found a newspaper and he spoke, the language, and he read it and read about the,
right.
the botched mission.
Right.
But to him, they were heroes, and it spread throughout all the hostages that these people risked their lives to try to save them. So they didn't feel alone. Right.
It was a crazy mission idea. Like the fact that they tried it was crazy. I mean, it seemed like such a tricky, with the technology where it's at today, they couldn't have even thought to do that.
No, it was so many moving parts. And plus, for me, being able to film President Carter, unlike you getting to film Obama, it took me 3 months to be able to do that.
Well, we didn't really film him. We just talked to him. And
talk to him.
But what did you find? How did you find him? Yeah, what's your memory of him as a president? Because I feel like I was not really politically awake at that time. What year was that? Was it 19?
The 70s. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was in high school. I did. I knew him. I knew the image of him. I knew the peanut farmer. I knew the nice guy thing. I knew my mother liked him. But what did you feel about him?
Oh, well, going back to that place, it's hard to go back to that place, but also how I feel about him now for meeting him and being with him. It was around the time he was the president, around the time that Harlan County came out.
Right.
And also, to me, he's such a diplomat. He's such a humanitarian. And even now in his old age, he still goes, he's in planes and he still goes and he helps people with houses.
Right.
And
yeah.
He's just an incredible human being when you compare him to what our world is today. Life is so different. Life is, you're always on edge. You always feel like you're walking on broken glass because you don't know what this leadership is going to do. What's their next move? So
there is no leadership. There's intentional chaos. Yeah.
There's an egomaniac.
Yeah, it's a vacuum it's terrible. But I mean, I felt that with Obama too, that he's a very grounded guy and a thoughtful guy and a decent guy that was trying to sort of, balance out the nature of the power he had, and also sort of nurture democracy. It is a tough management position to be a president, to manage. Yeah. To manage corporate interests, military interests, the interests of the people, and to figure out how to move forward through this system that is certainly not perfect, but it is what it is.
Yeah, for Carter, they said the only way you can talk to him is if you get in touch with a guy named Phil Wise at the Carter Center.
Yeah.
So I used to call Phil Wise, and he would never call me back. And his voicemail would go, howdy, this is Phil Wise, and I'm not in right now.